Hello children, this is K.V. Ramana, lecturer of Zoology. Today we are going to talk about one of the important concepts regarding the respiratory system of human being, the chief respiratory organs of the humans, that is about the lungs. Generally in the last previous lecture we have learned about the conductive zone and respiratory zone of the respiratory tract. That means we have seen total respiratory tracts from the external nostrils to up to alveoli. What about the chief respiratory organs in human beings? There are a pair of respiratory organs we call as a lungs. There are a pair of lungs present in the chest cavity or thoracic cavity or air filled cavity, right? The anatomical structure of the lungs is known as, it is a scientific study of explain about the structure and function of the lungs are called pulmonology. Pulmonology is a branch of biology which deals about the structure and function and disorders of the lungs are called pulmonologists. The person who studied about the lungs and their disorders are called pulmonologist, right? Let us see, in this class we are going to explain about the chief respiratory organs such as lungs. There are a pair of lungs present in the chest cavity or air filled thoracic cavity, right? If you see, the lungs are very specific in the human beings because it's made up of the spongy tissue. It does not or it cannot be changed their volume. It depends on the respiratory supportive muscles. That is, one is the diaphragm, second one is the intercostal muscles. Let me explain about the structure of the lungs. Basically, the lungs, both lungs are covered by the special membranes are called pleural membranes. These pleural membranes are, one is outer pleural membrane, second one is inner pleural membrane. The membrane which surround the outer side of the lungs, which is very close to the thoracic lining. That means there are two linings which surround the lungs. One is parietal membrane, second one is a visceral membrane. Parietal pleural membrane and visceral pleural membrane both are togetherly called pleura. The pleura is a membranous structures which surround the lungs. Here important, there are two pleural membranes. One is parietal membrane, second one is visceral membrane. Parietal membrane is which is very close contact with the surface of the thoracic lining, right? That means this is a parietal membrane. This parietal membrane is very close to lining of the thoracic lining. Next, visceral membrane is very close to the lung surface, right? There is a space present between the both membranes. That is a parietal membrane and pleural membrane is called pleural cavity. What is that? Pleural cavity. This pleural cavity is filled with the pleural fluid. There is a pleural fluid present between the parietal pleural membrane and visceral pleural membrane, which helps in reduce the friction the lung surface. That means during contraction relaxation of the lungs, right, some friction will be takes place between the two surface of the lungs, right? That means here there is a surface will be there, here the surface will be there. That friction will be reduced by the pleural fluid which is secreted by the pleural membranes. I think you have understood about that. Pleural fluid is present in the pleural cavity. The cavity is formed by the space present between the parietal membrane and visceral membrane, which helps in reduce the friction while working of the lungs, right? Sometimes what happens, this pleural fluid may increases their amount. Basically, in our adult human beings, there is a 150 ml of pleural fluid must be present. If it is increases, sometimes what happens due to bacterial infection, right, the pleural fluid will be increases. It leads to difficult to breathing. That is we can call as a dyspnea. What we can say? Dyspnea. Dyspnea is nothing but is a condition whenever the pleural fluid is increases, because the fluid which is present between the membranes create a pressure is called intra pleural pressure, right? This intrapleural pressure always two atmospheres lesser than the pulmonary pressure. Here I want to explain about the three important pressures. Three pressures, right? One is atmospheric pressure, right? Second one is interpulmonary pressure, and third one is intra pleural pressure, right? At the sea level, everybody knows the normal atmospheric pressure is 760 mm of Hg, that is a millimeter of mercury. Everybody knows. Interpleural pressure maybe depends on the atmospheric pressure, that we will take it as a 760 mm of Hg, because whenever the atmospheric pressure is equal to interalveolar pressure, there is no exchange of gases or there is no inhalation exhalation, because both atmospheric pressure as well as interpulmonary pressure is equal, so that there is no pressure difference, so that there is no inhalation exhalation. But very important thing here, the intrapleural pressure. Now I am talking to intrapleural pressure. So the pleural fluid which is present between the parietal pleural membrane and visceral pleural membrane create a pressure by the pleural fluid. That intrapleural pressure is always 756 mm of Hg. That means the intrapleural pressure is always depends on the interpulmonary pressure. For example, interpulmonary pressure is 760 mm of Hg, the intrapleural pressure must be 756. That means there is a 4 millimeter of mercury difference must be there. Interpleural pressure and intrapleural pressure. 4 mm of Hg must be less than the interpulmonary pressure. For example, interpulmonary pressure is, if it is a 750, the intrapleural pressure must be 746. Like that, there is a 4 mm of Hg difference must be there. Then only the lungs can be expand. Due to presence of this intrapleural pressure, some amount of air will be remain in the lungs. That lungs, what is the air will be remain in the lungs, even though after forceful expiration, that volume of air is called residual volume of air. What is the reason for the residual volume? Due to maintain the proper intrapleural pulmonary pressure. Okay, now this residual volume is nothing but, even though if you expire more amount of air outside, by forcefully some amount of air will be remain in the lungs, right? What purpose they have to remain in the lungs? To maintain the intrapleural pressure. We should need the intrapleural pressure also, right? I hope you understand about the pressure gradient between the atmospheric and the interpulmonary pressure and the intrapleural pressure. Atmospheric pressure is always 760 when we are in a sea level, right? This interpulmonary pressure is, if it is a 760, there is no inhalation exhalation, because both pressures are similar, or is nothing but both pressures are equal, so there is no inhalation exhalation. But the very important thing is, intrapleural pressure is depends on the interpulmonary pressure. If interpulmonary pressure is 760 mm of Hg, the intrapleural pressure must be 756 mm of Hg. 756 mm of Hg. That means there is a 4 atmospheric pressure is 4 mm of Hg. The difference must be present between interpulmonary pressure and intrapleural pressure. So now we have completed about the membranes, right? So there are two membranes which covers the lungs are called pleural membranes. Let it. Now if you see the internal structure of the lungs, so there are two lungs are present. One is the right lung, second one is the left lung. Right lung is larger, left lung is smaller. You know what is the reason behind this? Due to give the space for the heart, there is a small cardiac notch is present. A asymmetrical heart part is present in this area. At the same time, if you see clearly, why the right lung is larger? Because right lung is made up of 3 lobes. Why the left lung is smaller? Because it's made up of 2 lobes. So that, let me explain the lobes which are present in the lungs, right? If you take the right lung and left lung, right lung has 3 lobes, very important. One is upper lobe, second one is middle lobe, second one is middle lobe, third one is lower lobe. Okay, lower lobe. Now I'm talking about the left lung. Left lung basically divided into two lobes only. One is upper lobes. Second one is lower lobe. Now how these lobes are separated? Very important. So in the right side of the lung, upper lobe and middle lobe is separated by. Upper lobe and middle lobe is separated by a separation is called horizontal fissure. Fissure is a separation present between the upper lobe and middle lobe. Okay, now middle lobe and lower lobe is separated by a oblique manner. Okay, now it is a separation is present, that is called oblique what is that? Fissure. Oblique fissure, right? So right lung is divided into three lobes. One is upper lobe, second one is the middle lobe, third one is the lower lobe. Upper lobe and middle lobe is separated by the horizontal fissure. This is upper lobe, this is a lower lobe. Upper lobe and middle lobe, which is separated by the horizontal fissure, and middle lobe and lower lobe is separated by there is a oblique manner will be there. That's why it is called oblique fissure. Now come to the left lobe. Left lobe you have the two lobes only. One is upper lobe, second one is the lower lobe. Upper and lower lobe is separated by the left oblique fissure. In right side there are two fissures are present which divides the lung into three lobes. Okay, now but in the left lung there are two lobes only present which is separated by the left oblique fissure, right? Here two fissures are present, here one fissure is present. I hope you understand about the lobes of the lungs. Now I'm talking about the sizes of the right lung and left lung, right? What is the size of the right lung? The right lung is the weight of the right lung is 625 grams. Okay, now if it is a left lung, the weight of the left lung is 565 grams. This is important, the weight. At the same time, if you go inside the lung, so lungs have lobes. Now lobes are divided into, that means there are two lungs are there, two lungs have the lobes. Right lung have three lobes, left lung has two lobes. Now each lobe is divided into segments, very important. Each lobe is divided into segments. Now how many segments are present in the right lung? Right lung have 10 segments. Left lung has 8 segments. Now each segment is divided into lobules. What is that? Lobules. Now we have to understand about that. Lungs are divided into lobes. Lobes are divided into segments. Segments are divided into lobules. We have to understand about the internal structure of the lungs. In the internal structure, what are the structures are present in the internally? Trachea divided into two branches of, one is right primary bronchi, second one is left primary bronchus. Now right primary bronchus form the secondary from the tertiary bronchus form the primary bronchioles form the secondary bronchioles from the tertiary bronchioles from the terminal bronchioles. Now terminal bronchioles from the respiratory bronchiole from the alveolar duct from the atria from the eight sacules from the, what is that? Each eight saccule contain the, what is that? Alveoli, right? There are 2 to 3 alveoli is present. Let me explain about the alveoli, right?